Today's arthropod can be found chugging along the sidewalk or flying in the air, depending on when you see them, although they are way more famous in their larval stage. Can you guess what it is? Today's adventure takes us to the world of the woolly bear, or the Isabella tiger moth. They're both the same animal, just called different things at different points in their life. One's the larval stage, the woolly bear, and the other one, the Isabella tiger moth, is the adult form. Both of them have incredibly awesome names, obviously, and are beautiful in their own right. Today's episode is dedicated to my wife, Ashley. This was an arthropod she really wanted to learn more about. I am lucky enough to have an amazing partner to listen to me riddle off facts about countless animals and having me correct her every time she calls something a bug or she tries to squish something. And I had to tell her, no, please don't do that. And for a very long time, I was petrified of spiders, so she would have to rescue me, but I'd be telling her, please don't kill them because they're good for the environment. So thank you, Ashley, for always cheering me on and supporting me in all that I do. Today will be a little different. While we do always talk about every life stage, today's episode you will hear me call it by a different name depending on what we're talking about. So when we're talking about its larval stage, I will probably call it the woolly bear or caterpillar because it's a larva. And when we talk about its adult form, we will talk about it and call it the Isabella tiger moth or moth. So you will hear both of these names used throughout the episode today. The scientific name, this was a tricky one for me, so bear with me. As you remember, my Greek and Latin are not the best, but the scientific name is Pyrrhache isabella. Pyrrhache isabella. Again, I'm probably pronouncing that a little off, if not a lot off, but bear with me. And the etymology, which I hope you remember, is the study of the origin of words. The etymology of this name is just the coolest. And I know I say that a lot, but it really is. I got a lot of this information, as well as for the rest of the podcast, was from a resource from the University of Wisconsin at La Crosse. These websites were created by students in the biology program with the purpose of sharing information that they learned. It is here that I learned that the first part of its scientific name, PYR, which not 100% on the pronunciation of that, pyre, maybe, comes from the Latin word for fire. I guess I should have taken Latin in high school instead of Spanish. And if you're looking at the color of the body, this kind of makes sense because while in its woolly bear stage, it kind of has a burnt orange color. The second part of its name has the letters ARC. The word ARC, the letters ARC, which could come from the word Arctic. And this will make sense a little later in the episode when we talk about how amazing and special this animal is at adapting to cold weather environments. This website also shared with me that Isabella is a grayish yellow color, which I did not know, and it's kind of the color of its adult form. I was able to find some other information on its etymology on a different website, and it explained that the first part of its scientific name came from the Greek word meaning colored flame, which makes sense again, and the last part of its name, the Arctia part, comes from the Greek word for bear. And both of these descriptions give us a great idea about where this name comes from. Now, as far as its common name, the woolly bear, again, we're talking about the caterpillar, the larval stage. I think we could piece that one together ourselves. Bears are kind of woolly or fuzzy, and so are the larvae. They're covered with this thick hair, bristly type thing that we'll get to a little bit later. And they are also able to survive the cold winter months, hibernating just like our friends, the bears. Now, these insects are found all over the United States, Mexico, and Canada. I'm going to start off here with an interesting fact that in its adult form, this moth does not eat. That's right. I said it. It doesn't eat. Doesn't need to. In fact, it's only alive for around a week, probably less. Their only job as an adult is to find a mate, copulate, and they do that in the same way that we talked about last week, abdomen to abdomen. After they find a mate, they do their business, the female lays her eggs, and they promptly die. I think this is just fascinating because I personally cannot picture not eating. It's definitely my favorite thing to do. Now, the eggs are laid on leaves that the larval stage, the woolly bear, will eat. So the female Isabella tiger moth finds a plant that her babies will eat, kind of like the snowberry clearwing from last week. The eggs hatch relatively quickly, sometimes within a few days. Once hatched, we know what they do. Chomp, 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 right to eating. They want to get growing. And interestingly enough, we get 2 generations or broods of woolly bears or Isabella tiger moths every year. One in the late spring, Mayish time, and one again in late summer, early fall, August, September. Now, in their woolly bear or caterpillar form, they are banded, almost striped, if you will. If you've never seen them, please make sure to check out my show notes for some great pictures. The middle band is a reddish, burnt orange, brownish color, and that is flanked on each side with a dark black band. Now, just like we've talked about before, once they hatch, they will go through many different instars. That's a word we've heard before, and we know that it just means they're going through different stages of their larval life. They start off much smaller and get progressively bigger, and the bands change sizes as they continue to grow. Now, we recognize them when they get much older in their life. Usually we see them when they're about an inch or at their full grown size of about 2 inches, which is about the size of 2 quarters. The eggs that are laid in May eat, grow, and pupate all within a few months. By midsummer, they have finished all of that and have emerged from their cocoons as full-grown Isabella tiger moths, which again only live for about a week or so, enough to lay eggs. The second set of eggs, the ones laid towards the end of summer in August, hatch, but do not pupate anytime soon. In fact, they overwinter as caterpillars. This is fascinating because there are a bunch of species that overwinter for varying reasons, and we talked about one in previous episodes, but most of them do not overwinter as caterpillars. They stay in their cocoon and pupate. But here, our woolly bear stays a caterpillar, which is just fantastic because you're a little bit more exposed. This would be like you spending all winter outside in just your jacket, never going inside or never going in a car or anywhere that could be potentially warm. They will pupate in the spring once the weather starts to get warm. It is this group of caterpillars that we typically see the most of because we notice them walking around on the ground or crossing roads looking for somewhere to hide for the winter, usually in late fall. And when I'm saying they can survive in cold weathers, I mean cold, colder than you can imagine. These caterpillars can even survive sub-freezing temperatures. For us here in the United States, that is below 32 degrees, the freezing point. To keep them alive during these trying times, their bodies produce a chemical known as cryoprotectant. This acts like something we as humans call antifreeze, which we put in our cars to keep them running. I think you can sense why this chemical is important. It circulates through their body, making sure that they are never frozen to the point where there's no coming back. And while this chemical is spectacular, it is not a guarantee, and repeated freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing during the winter can have a high effect on these critters. It can cause and lead to a much higher mortality rate in caterpillars. This means that they are more likely to die during this process. But still, amazingly enough, the majority do survive, barring being found by something else and eaten or stepped on by a human. Another thing they do before winter comes is they stop eating and they empty their bodies of any feces or poop that they would have inside of them. You see, this stuff would freeze internally inside of them and cause ice crystals inside their body, which would ultimately lead to death. These tough little creatures are covered in woolly hairs that serve multiple purposes. They are great at keeping them warm during those cold winter months, but they also serve as protection, as these hairs can cause skin irritations, which is why you should not pick one up, as you're not sure if you're allergic to one or if it will produce a rash on your hands. It's also just nice to watch creatures sometimes. When threatened, you'll find them curled up into a ball, much like the pill bug we talked about in our very first episode. This not only stops humans from bothering them, but also warns other animals like wasps that says, hey, don't mess with me. Once they have pupated in the springtime, this second brood will emerge as an Isabella tiger moth. As we talked about a little earlier, the wings are a yellowish, tannish, or pale orange in color. Please check out the show notes to see how beautiful they are, or look at the photograph on the cover that my brother Stefan makes every week. The wings are dotted with black spots, although they are a lighter black in color, and you can also see faint lines on the wings that you will notice if you are looking up close. Woolly bears, the caterpillar larval stage, even play a role in folklore. You see, many people think that they can predict how cold or severe the winter will be. It is said that the middle brownish layer, the band, will be thicker. That means the winter is going to be mild, meaning not as cold. It also says that the darker the black bands, the more severe the weather will be, meaning the colder. The burnt orange brownish band in the middle of the caterpillar, the size is determined more upon how much it eats and how many times it's molted, more than it has to do with how severe the winter is going to be. The more it molts, the more it's eaten, the larger the brown band will be. And while this is just a folk tale, according to a resource I found written by Mary Holland, it may have some truth behind it, since brown hairs are added every time a caterpillar molts, which occurs when caterpillars eat. And if the winter comes early, it means that the caterpillar has less time to eat, so their bands would naturally be shorter because they haven't gotten the opportunity to grow. So the next time you see our fuzzy wuzzy banded friend crawling around in the fall, looking for a place to hibernate, or if you're lucky enough to see it in its adult tiger moth form, please make sure to say thank you for being so adaptive to the cold and for potentially telling us about the weather. And be very cautious with the fuzzy wuzzies. I'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have an arthropod you would love to hear about, want to tell me what you think about the show, or found a mistake, please send me an email at arthropodadventurespodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Stay inquisitive and never stop learning. Your fun fact about me today is I once coached a women's high school national champion in the sport of wrestling. It was many years ago, but still to date, one of my greatest accomplishments.